Picture this. It's 1995. You're standing in the young adult section of a bookstore, or maybe crammed into the corner of your school library during lunch period. The air smells like old paper and possibility. Your fingers trail along the spines of books nobody told you to read, books you chose yourself, and then you see them. Row after row of covers that seem to glow with an almost radioactive intensity. Greens and purples and oranges that shouldn't exist in nature. A ventriloquist dummy with eyes that follow you. A haunted mask twisted into a permanent scream. A werewolf mid-transformation, caught between boy and beast. Goosebumps. Your hand reaches out. Maybe for Welcome to Dead House, maybe for Monster Blood, maybe for the haunted mask. You pull it from the shelf, and the weight of it feels dangerous somehow. Forbidden. Like you're holding something your parents wouldn't quite approve of, something the teacher might snatch away if she caught you reading it in math class. You crack it open, and within 5 pages, your heart is racing. You're reading faster. The chapter ends on a cliffhanger, and you can't stop. You have to know what happens next. You have to see if the protagonist survives. Millions of kids around the world had this exact moment, this exact feeling, this exact electric thrill of fear mixed with pleasure, mixed with the rebellious joy of choosing your own story. And behind every single one of those moments, behind every nightmare you had after reading too late under the covers, behind every argument with your parents about whether these books were appropriate, there was a man, smiling, soft-spoken, wearing dad jeans and polo shirts, looking like someone who'd help you with your math homework, not someone who'd populate your dreams with living ventriloquist dummies and haunted cameras. His name is Robert Lawrence Stine. That's R.L. Stine to you, the man who built a $200 million empire out of things that go bump in the night, the man who made more money than most horror movie studios, the man who outsold Tom Clancy and John Grisham by writing 70-page books about killer sponges and evil garden gnomes. And here's the twist nobody saw coming. He wasn't even supposed to be a horror writer. "I have no idea why I write horror," Stine once said. "I was a funny kid. I didn't even like horror movies. Yet somehow, that funny kid would go on to terrify an entire generation. He'd teach millions of children to love reading by teaching them to be afraid. He'd turn fear into the most addictive drug in children's publishing. This is his story, the real story. The one about how a joke writer from Ohio became the architect of your childhood nightmares and loved every minute of it. Before there was fear, there was laughter." In Columbus, Ohio in 1943, a Jewish kid named Robert Lawrence Stine is born into a world that doesn't know what to do with him yet. He's an only child for 9 years, until his brother and sister arrive. He spends most of his childhood alone in his room doing what lonely, creative kids have always done, making up stories. But here's what nobody tells you about young Bob Stine. He was terrified of everything. Dogs? Terrifying. Swimming? Forget it. Getting hurt? The thought alone kept him inside. He was afraid of the world, so he built his own worlds. On paper. With a typewriter his parents gave him when he was 9 years old. That typewriter became his best friend, his personal escape hatch, his weapon against boredom and fear and the suffocating normalcy of suburban Ohio. And what did little Bob Stine write on that typewriter? Jokes, funny stories, silly adventures, things that made him laugh, things that made his friends laugh, things that helped him feel less alone. By the time he got to Ohio State University, Bob knew exactly what he wanted to be: funny. He edited the campus humor magazine. He soaked up MAD magazine like it was scripture. He worshipped at the altar of comedy. After college, he moved to New York City with $20 in his pocket and dreams of becoming the next great humor writer. And for 16 years, that's exactly what he tried to be. Jovial, fun Bob Stine. That was his pen name. Jovial. He wrote joke books with titles like 101, Silly Monster Jokes, and How to Be Funny. He wrote funny novels for kids. He edited a humor magazine called Bananas that lasted exactly 6 years before folding. He worked constantly, published regularly, and made basically no money. For almost 2 decades, Bob Stine tried to make kids laugh, and he was good at it. Not great, not successful enough to quit his day job, just good enough to keep going. And then he met her, Jane Waldhorn, an editor at the publishing house where Bob was freelancing. Sharp, smart, ambitious. She looked at this goofy guy with his typewriter and his joke books and saw something he maybe didn't see in himself. Potential. They started dating. They got married in 1969. And Jane became more than his wife. She became his partner, his editor, his business strategist, his first reader, the person who would change everything. In 1986, Bob is 43 years old. He's been writing professionally for almost 2 decades and has almost nothing to show for it financially. He's exhausted from churning out joke books. He's frustrated. He's wondering if he should just give up on this whole writing thing. And Jane says 5 words that will change his life forever. You should write scary books. Bob looks at her like she's insane. I don't know anything about horror, he tells her. I don't even like being scared. But Jane has done the math. Teen horror is exploding. Christopher Pike is selling millions. V.C. Andrews is printing money. Publishers are desperate for the next big thing in young adult horror. And Bob, with his quick writing, his understanding of kids, his ability to structure a story, could do this. So Bob writes a book called Blind Date, a teen thriller, a murder mystery, something dark. It sells. Then he writes another and another. Fear Street is born in 1989, a series about a cursed street where terrible things happen to ordinary teenagers. The books are dark. They're edgy. They have real stakes. Kids die in these books. There's blood. There's violence. And they sell. Really sell. By 1992, R.L. Stine has written dozens of Fear Street books. He's making decent money. He's found an audience. He's proven that the funny kid from Columbus can write scary stories that teenagers want to read, but he hasn't changed the world yet. Not yet. Then Scholastic calls. Picture the meeting. It's 1992, in an office somewhere in New York City. Bob Stine sits across from publishing executives who have a very specific problem. They need something for younger kids, middle schoolers, the gap between Sesame Street and Fear Street, something scary but not too scary, something that feels dangerous but is actually safe, something that will make kids beg their parents to buy the next book. Can Bob do that? Bob thinks about it. He's been writing for teenagers, kids who want real stakes, real fear, real consequences. But younger kids? That's different. That's a tightrope walk. Too scary and parents will revolt. Not scary enough and kids will be bored. He says yes anyway, and Goosebumps is born. The first book, Welcome to Dead House, hits shelves in July 1992. The cover is iconic. A creepy house, glowing windows, colors that seem to vibrate with malevolent energy. The story inside? A family moves to a new town. Something is very, very wrong. The neighbors are watching. And by the end, you realize everyone in town is dead. Kids devour it. Scholastic orders more. Bob writes faster. By 1993, he's releasing a new Goosebumps book every single month. 12 books a year. Each one is around 70 pages. Each one ending with a twist. Each one designed to make kids desperate for the next installment. And here's where it gets insane. By 1995, Bob Stine is writing a new book every 2 weeks. Let that sink in. Every 14 days, a complete novel. Outlined, written, revised, and delivered to his publisher. While most authors labor over one book per year, Bob Stine is producing 24. His secret? Discipline that borders on obsessiveness. Every morning, Bob wakes up, goes to his office, and writes exactly 10 pages. No more, no less, whether he feels inspired or not, whether the words are flowing or not. 10 pages. Every day, no exceptions. He outlines everything meticulously before he starts writing, every scare, every twist, every cliffhanger chapter ending. He knows exactly where the story is going before he types the first word. Then he executes. Fast, efficient, professional. "I'm not an artist," Stine would later say. "I'm a craftsman. I build books the way other people build furniture." But there's something else Bob does that's pure genius. He listens to his readers. Kids write him thousands of letters. They tell him what scared them, what didn't work, what they loved, what they hated. And Bob pays attention.
"I hope you make a lot more books. And if you die, tell a family member to finish them."
If kids say there's too much blood, he dials it back. If they say the monsters aren't scary enough, he makes them scarier. He treats his audience like collaborators, like market research that actually matters. And the numbers? The numbers become astronomical. 1995 is the year everything explodes. In that single year, Bob Stine earns $40 million. $40 million. That's $80 million in today's money, from children's books. He sells 14.4 million books in 12 months. At one point, 4 of the top 10 best-selling books in America all have the same author name on the cover, R.L. Stine. USA Today runs a headline calling him the best-selling author in America. Not children's author, just author. He's outselling everyone. Tom Clancy, John Grisham, Michael Crichton, all of them. Guinness World Records eventually crowns him the best-selling children's book series author in history. 400 million copies sold worldwide. More books than most authors could write in 10 lifetimes. Scholastic book fairs become battlegrounds. Kids line up with crumpled dollar bills and birthday money, fighting to get the newest Goosebumps before it sells out. Teachers complain that kids are reading during math class, during recess, during lunch. Parents find flashlights under pillows because their kids are reading after bedtime. R.L. Stine has done the impossible. He's made reading cool. He's made books into social currency. You're not cool in 1995 unless you've read the latest Goosebumps, unless you can talk about whether Slappy the Dummy is scarier than Monster Blood, unless you have the entire collection lined up on your shelf, those glowing spines announcing to everyone who enters your room that you're part of the club. Bob Stine, the joke writer, the guy who couldn't make it in comedy, the man who spent 16 years in obscurity, has become the most powerful force in children's publishing. And he's just getting started. But what's the secret? What makes Goosebumps different from every other horror series that tried and failed? Let's break it down. Because Bob Stine didn't just stumble into success. He engineered it. First, understand what Goosebumps isn't. It's not Stephen King for kids. It's not watered-down adult horror. It's something entirely different. A carefully calibrated experience designed to give kids the thrill of fear without the trauma of real terror. Think of it like a roller coaster. When you strap into a roller coaster, you feel afraid. Your heart races, your palms sweat, you scream. But deep down, you know you're safe. The rails are solid. The engineers did their job. You're going to survive this. That's Goosebumps. Bob Stine gives kids permission to feel scared in a completely safe environment. And that feeling, that controlled fear, that safe danger, is intoxicating. The Stine formula has 5 core elements. Element 1, the twist ending. Every Goosebumps book ends with a surprise. Sometimes the monster wins. Sometimes it was all a setup for the sequel. Sometimes everything was fake. Or was it? Kids never know what's coming, and that unpredictability keeps them buying the next book. It's not enough to read one Goosebumps. You have to read them all, because each one might surprise you differently. Element 2, relatable protagonists. Bob's main characters aren't special. They don't have magical powers or secret destinies. They're just normal kids, awkward, scared, trying to fit in, who get thrown into weird situations. And that relatability is everything. Every kid reading can think, that could be me. You don't need to be brave or special or chosen. You just need to survive. Element 3. Cliffhanger chapters. Bob ends every chapter, literally every chapter, on a scare or a question. A shadow moves in the corner. A door creaks open. The protagonist realizes they're not alone. It's architectural. It's designed to be addictive. You physically cannot put the book down because you need to know what happens next. Element 4. No gore. Maximum imagination. Here's where Bob shows his genius. He doesn't describe violence in graphic detail. He doesn't show you blood and guts and body parts. Instead, he suggests. He implies. He makes you imagine the horror yourself. And your imagination? Your imagination is always scarier than anything he could write. Kids fill in the blanks with their own worst fears, and that personalization makes every book uniquely terrifying. Element 5. Those covers. Tim Jacobus painted almost every original Goosebumps cover, and each one is a masterpiece of commercial art. They're bright, they're lurid, they practically glow on the shelf, and they promise exactly what's inside, a specific identifiable scare. You see a ventriloquist dummy, and you know that book is about an evil puppet. You see a haunted mask, and you know someone's going to put it on and regret it. The covers are truth in advertising, and kids trust them. But here's what made Bob Stine a fortune while driving critics insane. He never pretended to be writing literature. Teachers and librarians complained that Goosebumps books were junk food for the brain, that they were empty calories, that they were training kids to want cheap thrills instead of meaningful stories. Literary critics wrote think pieces about how R.L. Stine was destroying children's literacy. And Bob smiled and kept writing, because here's what the critics missed. Getting kids to read anything at all is an achievement. And Goosebumps wasn't stopping kids from reading other books. It was the gateway drug. Kids who'd never voluntarily picked up a book were suddenly reading voraciously. And once they developed that habit, once they learned that books could be fun, many of them moved on to other genres, other authors, other stories. R.L. Stine created readers, not scholars. Readers, and that's worth infinitely more than literary prestige. Plus, every time a school tried to ban Goosebumps or a parent group complained they were too scary, something magical happened. Sales went up, dramatically. Nothing makes a kid want to read a book more than an adult telling them they shouldn't. Bob understood this instinctively. He understood that controversy sells, that forbidden fruit tastes sweeter, that every pearl-clutching parent and concerned teacher was actually his most effective marketing team. He built a $200 million empire on understanding what adults forgot. Kids want to feel grown up. They want to push boundaries. They want to do things that feel slightly dangerous. And reading a Goosebumps book, that felt dangerous. That felt rebellious. That felt like getting away with something. Bob Stine didn't just sell books. He sold the feeling of breaking the rules. But nothing lasts forever. By 1997, something is changing. The original Goosebumps series ends after 62 books. Sales are still strong, but the explosive growth has plateaued. Kids who grew up on Goosebumps are aging out. And something new is coming. A boy wizard named Harry Potter. In 1997, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is published in the UK. In 1998, it hits American shelves. And within 2 years, it's clear that the entire landscape of children's publishing has shifted. Parents who'd been suspicious of Goosebumps suddenly embrace a 700-page book about magic and wizards. Teachers who'd banned R.L. Stine from their classrooms put Harry Potter on required reading lists. The irony isn't lost on Bob. For years, people complained his books were too scary, too simplistic, too commercial. Now they're celebrating a series with actual death, actual violence, actual terror, because it has literary merit. But Bob doesn't complain. He adapts, because that's what survivors do. He launches Goosebumps 2000, then Goosebumps Horrorland, then Goosebumps Most Wanted. He writes Fear Street Nights, bringing back his teen series for a new generation. He never stops working, never stops writing, never stops finding new angles, new hooks, new ways to scare kids. Critics said he was a one-trick pony, that Goosebumps was a fad that would fade, that in 10 years nobody would remember R.L. Stine. They were wrong. Fast forward to 2015. Bob Stine is 72 years old. Goosebumps has been out of the cultural spotlight for over a decade. The books still sell, but they're not the phenomenon they once were. Bob is still writing, still publishing, but he's legacy now. A name from the 90s, a nostalgia play. And then Hollywood calls. Sony Pictures wants to make a Goosebumps movie, but they don't want to adapt just one book. They want something bigger, something meta, something that will work for kids who never read the books and adults who grew up on them. The pitch. What if R.L. Stine was a character in his own movie? What if his monsters were real and trapped inside his books? What if they all escaped at once? Bob loves it. Jack Black signs on to play a fictionalized version of R.L. Stine, bitter, reclusive, haunted by his own creations. The movie is funny and scary and surprisingly heartfelt. And when it opens in October 2015, it makes $158 million worldwide. Suddenly, R.L. Stine is relevant again. Kids who've never read a Goosebumps book are discovering him through the movie. Adults who grew up reading him are taking their own kids to see it. The franchise is resurrected. The sequel comes in 2018, Goosebumps 2. Haunted Halloween doesn't make as much money, but it doesn't matter. The brand is alive again. Then 2021 happens. Netflix drops the Fear Street trilogy. 3 movies, 3 weeks, 1 continuous story. Based on Bob's teen horror series from the 1990s, but reimagined for an R-rated audience. Real blood, real violence, real terror, and it's a massive hit. Suddenly, 30-somethings who grew up on Goosebumps are binging Fear Street and realizing that R.L. Stine was always more versatile than anyone gave him credit for, that he understood horror on a deeper level than just kids' books, that there was always darkness lurking beneath those bright covers. The trilogy trends worldwide. Social media explodes with Fear Street content. Gen Z discovers R.L. Stine isn't just their parents' author. He's relevant, current, cool. Then Disney Plus comes calling. October 2023, a new Goosebumps series launches. Not an anthology like the 90s show. A serialized story with real actors, real production value, real scares. Justin Long stars. The show gets solid reviews, and in January 2025, Season 2 drops. Goosebumps, The Vanishing. At 81 years old, R.L. Stine is having a career renaissance. The books that critics dismissed as disposable have proven immortal. The franchise that was supposed to die with the 90s is thriving across multiple platforms. And the man himself? Still writing, still creating, still finding new ways to scare people. 3 decades after Goosebumps first hit shelves, R.L. Stine is more relevant than ever. How many authors can say that? But who is Bob Stine when he's not writing about haunted ventriloquist dummies and killer scarecrows? Here's the truth. He's almost aggressively normal. He lives on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in an apartment overlooking Central Park. The place is worth $22.5 million. 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, a library, 84 feet of windows facing the park. It's the kind of apartment that appears in Architectural Digest, the kind of place that screams, "I made it." His favorite food? Pizza, nothing fancy. Just New York pizza from the place around the corner. His favorite movie? The original 1933 King Kong. He's watched it hundreds of times, still gets excited talking about it. He loves dogs, has had multiple King Charles Spaniels over the years, posts pictures of them online. He absolutely adores them. His daily routine? Wake up, write, take a break, write some more, watch TV, have dinner with Jane. That's it. No frills, no wild parties, no scandalous affairs or public meltdowns. Just work and life and the quiet satisfaction of doing what he loves. He and Jane have been married since 1969, 55 years and counting. She still edits every word he writes. She still manages the business side of his empire. She still pushes him to be better, to try new things, to keep evolving. They have one son, Matthew, who became a musician instead of following his father into publishing. Bob supported that decision, encouraged it even, because he understands that success isn't about following someone else's path, it's about finding your own. There's something almost radical about Bob Stine's normalcy. In an industry full of tortured artists and self-destructive geniuses, he's proof that you can be wildly successful, incredibly wealthy, and genuinely happy without burning yourself out. He's not haunted by his work. He doesn't torture himself over every word. He doesn't drink to cope with the pressure. He just shows up every day, does the work, and enjoys his life. "I'm the most boring person you'll ever meet," he said in interviews, and he seems genuinely okay with that. More than okay, proud even. Because Bob Stine figured out something that eludes most artists. Success isn't about suffering, it's about showing up. It's about doing the work even when you don't feel inspired. It's about treating creativity like a job you happen to love, instead of waiting for lightning to strike. At 81, he's still writing, still publishing, still touring. This fall, he's scheduled to appear in Long Island, Washington, D.C., California, and Tampa, meeting fans, signing books, doing the work. His latest book, The Last Sleepover, is the 5th entry in the Goosebumps House of Shivers series. He's working on Stine Tingler's 4, a collection of new stories. He's adapting his work into graphic novels. He's consulting on the Disney Plus series. Most people his age are retired. Bob Stine is busier than ever and loving every minute of it. So what does all of this add up to? 400 million books sold, 350 titles published, a $200 million net worth, multiple film franchises, multiple television series, merchandise ranging from action figures to haunted house attractions. Those are the numbers, the measurable impact, the things you can put on a spreadsheet. But what about the unmeasurable impact? How do you quantify the millions of kids who learned to love reading because of Goosebumps? The shy kids who found confidence in surviving scary stories, the struggling readers who suddenly couldn't put books down, the teachers who quietly added Goosebumps to their classroom libraries because they saw what it did for reluctant readers? How do you measure the value of making reading cool, of turning books into social currency, of creating a generation of readers who grew up to become writers themselves, who cite R.L. Stine as the reason they fell in love with storytelling? You can't. It's immeasurable. But talk to any millennial or Gen Z reader about their reading origin story, and 9 times out of 10, they'll mention R.L. Stine. They'll talk about the first Goosebumps book they read. They'll remember the feeling of fear mixed with excitement. They'll describe standing in line at the Scholastic book fair, desperate to get the newest release before it's sold out. R.L. Stine created a reading culture. He made books into an event. He proved that children's literature could be commercially successful, critically divisible, and culturally significant all at once. And he did it by refusing to compromise, by understanding his audience better than anyone else, by respecting kids enough to give them real scares, real twists, real stories that treated them like intelligent readers capable of handling complexity.
Okay, so I'm here with my brother today. We recently read a book together. This is the book, The Prom Queen by R.L. Stine, and we're going to tell you our thoughts.
The movie was awful.
It was so bad. It was so bad, actually.
The movie is a whole different thing from this. This book, first of all, I rated a 9 out of 10. This book, if this was made in the movie, that movie would have been awesome.
Ask modern horror authors under 40 who influenced them, and R.L. Stine comes up constantly. He didn't just write books, he created an entire genre. He proved there was a massive, underserved market for age-appropriate horror. He showed publishers that kids wanted to be scared, that parents would buy books that pushed boundaries, that there was a fortune to be made in carefully calibrated fear. He changed the industry, and he's still changing it. So what's the real story of R.L. Stine? It's not about natural talent. Bob admits freely that he's not a literary writer, that he's not trying to win the National Book Award. It's not about luck, though timing certainly helped. It's not even about the money, though the money is certainly impressive. The real story of R.L. Stine is about understanding your audience so completely that you can give them exactly what they need before they even know they need it. It's about showing up every day and doing the work, even when inspiration doesn't strike. It's about finding your lane and staying in it. It's about building something so specific, so perfectly calibrated for its intended audience that it becomes universal. Bob Stine turned childhood fear into childhood joy. He gave millions of kids a safe place to feel scared. He taught them that monsters could be defeated, that fear could be conquered, that reading could be the greatest adventure of all. And here's the secret the critics never understood. Goosebumps wasn't about scaring kids. It was about empowering them. Every book was a test. Can you handle this? Can you make it to the end? Can you survive the twist? And millions of kids passed that test. They survived. They conquered their fear. And they came back for more. At 81, Robert Lawrence Stine is still writing, still creating, still scaring people. And after more than 350 books, he shows no signs of stopping. He built a $200 million empire by doing one thing exceptionally well, making people want to turn the page. And in the end, isn't that what every writer dreams of? To create something so compelling, so addictive, so perfectly crafted that readers can't help but keep going? R.L. Stine achieved that dream, and then he did it 400 million times. Reader, beware. You're in for a scare, and R.L. Stine, he's still got plenty of scares left to give. Before you turn every light on and pretend that creak was just the house settling, hit subscribe. Around here, we don't run from the things that go bump in the night. We binge watch documentaries about them. And if R.L. Stine gave you childhood chills, wait until you step into our next story, Stephen King. Stine warned you not to open the basement door. King? He'll convince you it was never a door. It was a portal, and now you've accidentally invited something in. Click over, if you dare. Because the only thing scarier than missing the next video is hearing a tiny voice whisper, "Reader beware," when you're home alone.